Hello and good evening. You're watching Worldview on Dialogus. I am Vishal Dahiya. In this episode, we're going to talk about the ongoing Israel Iran conflict. In fact, it has been more than a week since Israel and Iran have been raining missiles on each other's territory. Tremendous loss of life, infrastructure on both sides, but it doesn't look like that the end is anywhere nearer for this conflict. In fact, there are various other aspects as well. For example, what is the role of the United States of America in this? Also, the big question arising here is that what is going to be the outcome of this conflict, both for Israel and Iran? Will Israel be able to achieve the two targets which it had set out to when it started raining missiles on Iran? That is, undermining or finishing off Iran's nuclear program, and the larger one, which has emerged much later, that is regime change in Iran. Will that be possible? Will Iran be able to go ahead and defend itself, or rather counter Israel to an extent where it can thwart further attacks? Various other connotations as well, both in West Asia and various other parts of the world, including impact on India, because India shares a very definitive and clear relationship with both Israel and Iran on different aspects. So try and understand these, numerous aspects and the nuances further of these specific issues related to Israel-Iran conflict. We are today joined by two distinguished experts. Let me first introduce them to you. Former Ambassador Anil Trigunayat is with us, and we're also joined by Mr. Atul Aneja, a strategic affairs expert and a war veteran journalist. He's been in West Asia for a very long period, looked at various such conflicts from close quarters, reported from there as well. Welcome, both of you, gentlemen, to Worldview. I'll begin with you, Ambassador Trigunayat, and let's start by taking an overview. And the first question which strikes anybody's mind when we are talking about the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict, although this is not the first one, but this war which has erupted between these two countries, why do you think this happened? What was the immediate pressing need for Israel to start this conflict?
Thank you, Vishalji, for inviting me to this along with my dear friend Atul Aneja. In fact, this is a war that everybody hoped will not happen. No one wanted Iran and Israel direct confrontation, which will conflagrate the whole region. I mean, that has been the basic premise on which, since at least the last 40 years, people have worked upon. But at the same time, both Iran and Israel also suffer from this MAD syndrome, mutually assured destruction syndrome, and they consider each other as an existential threat. Even if there is no threat from somebody, you create one. In that, the gray zone warfare plays out a very big role. And Israel essentially does not want the nuclear deal, which Trump was very keen on, to go through. First time also, he was able to play it out, and Trump walked out of that nuclear deal. This is the second time this has happened, because you know that on the Sunday they were supposed to have another last meeting of the meeting, the sixth round between Steve Witkoff and Argachi in Oman. But just before day before, he started these direct hits. According to him, he determined that Iran was on the verge of making 9 or 10 nuclear weapons and had enriched enough material. I mean, there's no doubt that ever since the fall of the JCPOA, Iran has continued to enrich as a pressure tactic, as well as trying to really pursue a weapon, which they have been denying it. But the fact remains is that today, if anybody can get it, will get it. And that's Iran is not going to leave that quest. They were not here. That is very clearly evident from two things. One is that Tulsi Gabbard herself, in her testimony, said that Iran was nowhere near having a weapon. Then Grossi, the IAEA Director General, just 2 days ago, has said that they had no evidence that Iran was pursuing systematically a weapon. So what did Israel do? Israel wanted to drag the United States back into this war. And that's precisely what he's done. He has approached the Americans because Trump has been unhappy with him for breaching the ceasefire and not reaching there. That's why Trump had to talk directly to Hamas. Likewise, the administration also talked to Houthis to buy their own peace. So
Hmm.
Trump essentially is a non-war man of conventional kind. He believes and loves tariff wars. That's a different kind of a thing, but he does not. So he is getting dragged into it. And what we are seeing when he says, I may or I might not, I mean, that clearly shows the kind of ambivalence that he's wading through at this stage. So, in my view, it is essentially that Israel is trying to, and also we have seen domestically both Israel and Iran are in trouble.
Okay.
Iran for different reasons, Israel for the excesses that Netanyahu and his ultra rightist government is doing within the country and outside. So
Okay.
that's why he wants to distract the attention. And he took it out because once Iran is a bigger enemy, a major enemy, and he thought that he has been taking out Hezbollah and others, so it'll be easier for them to do so. I think they made some miscalculations in this.
Okay, okay. Let me bring in Mr. Aneja here as well to try and further explore the question of why did it happen. Mr. Aneja, as Judith is pointing out, clearly the idea was to take care of the existential threat, the MAD syndrome, which is shared by both Israel and Iran. Perhaps the Israeli dispensation thought that this is the right opportune moment the excess of Iranian proxies against Israel weakened to an extent. But in between, off late in last 2 3 days, or rather after 48 hours of the beginning of the conflict, Israel very quickly shifted goals, saying that the Iranian supreme leader is not off limits, and the idea is regime change. So is that something which was pre-planned or something which strategically was thought out that now it is possible?
First of all, Vishal, as you pointed out, and what Anil was also referring to, what has happened in Iran is within a certain context. And the context really is Israel's intent to wipe out what it called the axis of resistance. So it achieved taking out each element of the axis of resistance. First, it was the Hamas. Then it was Hezbollah, which was most important. Bashar al-Assad is gone. So the Houthis have been weakened. So the only weak link, or the only residual or core of the resistance front is Iran. So this was a domino effect which was going on, and now Iran is being targeted. Now the question is that it's not so easy. They are not a pushover nation. So therefore, it has to drag US into it, and that's where we are. You mentioned the Iranian nuclear program to be targeted. Yes, they did target the Iranian nuclear program, but I'm not sure to what effect, because the IAEA has not confirmed that it has been irreversibly diminished in its capacity. So that still remains. And that's where Israel right now is. It needs a further push. And the further push has come in terms of dragging the US into it by declaring that their goal now is not just undermining Iran's nuclear capability, but moving it further to regime change, the point which you are making. Now, if you have to do regime change, Israel cannot do it on its own. And that's where this crucial question which Anil was referring to, which is that Trump not naturally inclined to it, but Iran and the Jewish lobby pushing very hard inside the United States to drag him into it. So that's where we are. So regime change, how can it be accomplished? First thing is, I think the Israelis need capacity. If you have to hit among the nuclear installations, Fardo, which is the most important, is the enrichment, which does most of the enrichment of uranium. Fardo is inside a mountain, Vishal, and I remember I traveled from Tehran to Qom, which is about 54 kilometers away, and this comes on the west side of that. It's a huge mountain under which they are dug up and put all the centrifuges in. Now you need bunker buster bombs of a very high caliber, which Israel doesn't have. And that's where Americans have to come in. But the second question remains that even if you go ahead and destroy Fardo, does that bring down the regime? Because you have done your airstrikes, you may even have assassinated people. But regime change is usually accomplished by two reasons. One is if there's an internal revolt within Iran. People come out in the streets, then there's a revolution from below. We have seen some signs of it, but I don't see any critical mass of that developing so far. So that's difficult to achieve. The second thing is if you get boots on the ground, what you did with Saddam Hussein and others. I don't see that also happening. So while this may be Israel's intent, regime change, but I don't see that coming to its logical conclusion. Unless the people of Iran revolt, and that is not happening right now. We'll have to watch that vector to see if regime change can be accomplished or not.
Okay. And Mr. Trigunayat, since we're talking about regime change and we're talking about all kind of statements which are coming in from both Israel and United States as well on this aspect, Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei, 86-year-old, is passed on the powers, rather, transfer the powers to IRGC now, perhaps anticipating that he's also one of the prominent targets. And now it is being publicly, said so by the Israeli government and Israeli authorities as well. So the question is, as Mr. Aneja is pointing out, one, we've seen numerous instances. Have we learned nothing from history that the external, ways of bringing in regime change are not, fruitful in the long term? But if that is not done, what is the other option? There seems to be no critical mass developing, as Mr. Aneja is saying, within Iran.
You see, where there is no reason, you create one. And that is the strategy. And regime change has been the strategy of the Americans for a very long time, which Israel has adopted. In their playbook, the last chapter is yet to be written. So they can come, destroy, kill people, remove them, hang them. At the end of the day, they leave the place in utter destruction. We have seen what happened in Iraq. They manufactured the evidence. There was no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. I was ambassador in Libya. I have seen it, what they did to Gaddafi. They were not saints, but at the same time, there were no critical mass there. But so they just removed them. So if you kill Khamenei today, for example, I mean, it's not going to change anything. In any case, he's 86-year-old. He's ailing. He might pass in natural course. But does that change the ideology of the place? No doubt there are problems. There is opposition in the country. There are people who might feel that a more moderate section of the society would like to have. But today you have the president who is less conservative, the current regime. So is that the agenda, that just to create a more unstable Iran, which will be very dangerous for the region in any case? Because of these instability, the worst scourge that we are facing is terrorism. You have the Al-Qaeda's, you have the ISIS and all kinds of... this is what happens. Because in my view, the invasion of Iraq was the mother of all evils. And this same chapter, they continued through the Arab Spring, and they have not learned their lessons. So they just, I mean, I can understand. This is their playbook.
In fact, Mr. Trigunayat, since you're mentioning that, one very famous talk of the town, or rather quote or saying within the expert community is vis-a-vis United States, that in 20 years, United States replaced Taliban with Taliban in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. And they are the ones who spawned it in the first place. They are their babies. To fight against Soviet Union, they created it. And so then they fought against them, and they finally handed back the power to them. So their history and their track record is not credible at all. But we must remember that wherever there is some kind of a growth, some kind of independence, you can expect these kind of policies to be adapted. And nobody is immune from that. But this is how they work, the superpowers and the hyperpowers. So this is a routine thing for them. So regime change, in my view, will cause more chaos, and we might have another problem in the region.
Okay. Mr. Aneja, one very interesting aspect here is if you look a little deeper into it, and perhaps, I would like to understand from you, since you've seen the region, you've reported from there as well. Has Israel, overplayed its hand this time around? And also, when it comes to United States, have they also lost an opportunity, because perhaps they were hoping that with a bit of military pressure on Iran, maybe they can negotiate a better deal with Iran? But has that time also passed now in terms of having some better deals with Iran?
I agree with you. The time for negotiations is long gone, because it's going to be a huge loss of face for Iranian leadership to go in for negotiations when missiles are raining all over the country. This is not the stage for any kind of diplomacy. The second point I want to make is that perhaps they went too far, the Israelis, and they cannot accomplish regime change right now. And I'll tell you why. Let's look at three examples of regime changes. Let's look at Iraq. Iraq, they could achieve regime change because you send US forces into Iraq, and they toppled Saddam, and you created an alternate government out there. Dysfunctional for a long time, but nevertheless, you had the critical mass to create, you had the armed forces to create regime change when it came to Iraq. Libya, extensive use of terror groups who marched from Benghazi, where Anil was there, and I was reporting from Benghazi. Sorry, he was there in Tripoli while I was reporting from Benghazi. I remember that day in March when there was this fear that the hordes are going to descend on Benghazi, and and finally it leads to killing of Gaddafi. So again, you had people on the ground who could do it. In the case of Iran, I don't see from where are they going to get, unless people within revolt. If they don't, you are not going to get people or forces marching from Iraq into Iran. If you look at the geography of it, none of the Gulf countries are going to do that. So therefore, I don't see how, suppose Americans do the thing. They say they have weakened Iran, and let's say they drop large contingents. Let's say what we possibly did in Tangail in Bangladesh, something like that. You drop forces, but then it's not easy, because while you're doing air attacks from the air, that's a different ball game. You have acquired air superiority. Then if you land forces there, let's say you drop forces, and by the way, this was done during Carter's time, 1970. They dropped people and they were smashed just after the revolution. Then it comes to a ground warfare. The advantage which you have from having air superiority, you no longer have on the ground. You don't know the terrain as well as the Iranians do. And have those ground forces, there's a combat between them. I'm not sure where you can accomplish.
Then it becomes an urban warfare, which went on for some time in Iraq, and in Afghanistan, the guerrilla war tactics. Then it becomes a different ball game altogether.
It's a different ball game altogether. I would look at the reverse. The point which Anil made initially, that the Netanyahu, I would call it regime, is also under pressure from his domestic audience. With great difficulty, they managed to form this coalition with the right and ultra-right. But there is a groundswell of opposition against Netanyahu. None of the hostages, or very few of the hostages, have been released. The objectives of their attacks in Gaza have not been achieved, and you see these protests building up in places like Tel Aviv. It's like a Tahrir Square there as well. So if the war gets prolonged and Iranian strikes continue, if they do manage to, may not be with the same momentum, but still be able to cause some damage, then the shoe is on the other foot. There's going to be a lot of people within Israel who are going to question, why the hell are you doing all this? Half of a country is living in shelters. If they can prolong it, if the Iranians cave in quickly, then it's a different thing. But please go ahead.
That's because that's a much better, a much rather improved democracy than Iran there is. People have, a much larger opportunities to go ahead and express their opinions openly. So basically, it's a double-edged sword, which perhaps the Israeli Prime Minister is walking on right now. But let's I like to shift focus to very immediate concerns and to very immediate aspects, and that is quickly from both of you. I'll start with Mr. Trigunayat. Mr. Trigunayat, let's look at it from Indian perspective. And when we look at it from Indian perspective, I would also like your comment on the Pakistan's position in this, because Pakistan is considered a very close ally of Iran now. The Pakistani chief of army staff, who's just recently was made field marshal, had a cup of tea or a luncheon with the US president as well. Once again, can we see shifting alliances for Pakistan? Are they in a bind? Are they in trouble? Are they at crossroads? And what does this mean for India, this entire conflict, and which way Pakistan decides to stand?
Well, let me first talk about Pakistan. Pakistan is a nation of mercenaries and a rentier state. So they will fall for anybody who pays the price. They initially, when they saw some Islamic elements there, wanted to create that, okay, we have the Islamic bomb, and if Iran is attacked by nuclear bomb by Israel, they will go and bomb Israel. That was to garner their solidarity with the Islamic world. But the fact that it also is a non-NATO country, it still remains to be a non-NATO ally, and they have very close military and intelligence partnership with the United States, irrespective of whatever we have seen in the past. Very close. That we have seen with the CENTCOM commanders' comments also before this. The kind of PR firm, Schiller Company, that they have hired, which is very close to President Trump. President Trump, in his very first speech on January 20th, thanked Pakistan for helping them with some release of some people. Now, getting General Munir, firstly for June 14th parade, and then to be having lunch with President Trump is definitely a big change in that sense. Big change in that sense is that they know that only person who counts in that country is the army chief, or now he's field marshal. And therefore, he is the one who's going to decide where to move. Now, as like 9/11, they are ready to take the work from the Iranian strategic ports and airports and use them to fight against Iran. So this is something that they are trying to work upon. And they would have got. Pakistan, in any case, now I saw some reports that they've been offered the F-22 Raptors, F-35s, and some other military assistance. Trump himself had given $400 million for those maintenance of F-16s to them. And he's giving them the total win in my view. So he has strengthened the position of Pakistan. They have got something from IMF. They got Asian Development, World Bank. I mean, that could not have happened without the American support. So that is there. So Pakistan benefits in this, but Pakistan will not veer away from China. That is my reading in that case. Irrespective, they will play both. As far as India is concerned, well, this region, in my view, is of existential importance for us. Security and stability in the region is of utmost importance for supplies of energy, supplies of economy, the manpower that we have 9.5 million people, their safety, security. We just took out about 100 odd people from Iran, and there are several hundreds in Israel as well. We had done it earlier. We can do it. We have to do it again. So think about the proportion that the energy supply will be disrupted. Your manpower, the human resource or Indians who are their experts are going to be in the line of fire. So last time, if you remember, in Abu Dhabi, when one drone struck, the only person who died was an Indian. And in Israel also, when the Hamas, the previous war, it was the Indian nurses. So there are so many of them. And that's going to be a major challenge for the government. That's why Indian government has been involved from the beginning, talking to everybody, try to assuage the situation if it is possible, and talking about dialogue, diplomacy, and all that. Of course, it's not the time for that. Only country that can stop it jointly is with Russia. So Russia and the US can jointly do that.
Okay. Mr. Aneja, your concluding comments on these two aspects, first from India's perspective, because we have strategic partnership with both Israel and Iran. We've seen how our partnership with Israel is important in during Operation Sindoor. As far as Iran is concerned, the entire energy supply, the supply chain movement, Chabahar port and all. So this is really, really important for us to have peace in the region and ensure that our relationship with both these nations continue. And therein comes the Pakistan element as well. So how do we navigate this?
First of all, reinforcing our strategic autonomy as a concept. Because here are contradictory interests. Weapons from Israel, very important. Energy from the region, exceptionally important. Right? The route to Afghanistan, Central Asia through Chabahar to counter Gwadar for Pakistan, which is very close by, extremely important. Third, in case there's a spillover of this conflict into the Gulf countries, because Iran has warned that if any of the Gulf bases are used for attack against Iran, with Americans use them, then these become legitimate targets, and that's the ultimate, the worst case scenario, because you got millions of people then in the Gulf countries if that gets sort of engulfed in this. So I agree with Anil that our interests here are absolutely critical, and we need perhaps to do as much proactive diplomacy as possible to diffuse it. It's not, we can't stay on the sidelines because of these interests. Number one. Number two, regarding Pakistan. Pakistan has to respond to two vectors. The push from the Americans, which is anti-Iran. In fact, theoretically, I don't think that's going to happen. But Pakistan has a natural border with Iran. So if you have to do regime change, we're talking about foot soldiers. One channel which could be Pakistan, pushed by the United States. The second vector is contradictory, which is China. And China does not want Pakistan to intervene in Iran because of Chinese enormous interests. Iran's more than India, in the sense that the sourcing of oil for China, it's far more than what India sources from Iran.
So Strait of Hormuz is very, very significant for them as well.
Then completely, energy security is vital, and for that, stability in Iran is necessary. So I don't see the Pakistanis particularly playing any proactive role in precipitating the situation over there. On the contrary, there is a Sunni Shia element here which is very strong, which came around 1998 when there were Iranians caught in Mazar-e-Sharif, basement of the consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif. And there was a decision to be taken what to do with them. And the decision, because through Taliban, had to be taken by the Pakistani ISI. I remember very clearly, the Pakistani ISI ordered the killing of these 10 diplomats in the consulate. That was a turning point. Because that, with Iranians having these long memories, the relationship with Pakistan saw completely, and not just 4 months back, there were Iranian attacks inside Pakistan, air attacks against some terror groups, this Jundala group, which was operating in Iran through Pakistan with Pakistan's air base. So I don't see any kind of a bonding coming through between Iran and Pakistan on any Islamic platform. If you look deep, that's not there. So Pakistan will play ball, pretend to be a player, but I see the hands are really tied. Unless they decide, if there's a deal with the Americans are desperate to get back into this region. They got out of Afghanistan in 2022, 23.
Yeah.
And are not there in the Southwest Asian region. They can make a comeback through Pakistan, and that's the reason why I think they started cultivating Pakistan so openly. And Trump also talking about intervention in Kashmir. Indeed. So I think Americans will try to get back through Pakistan, but let's see how the Pakistanis react because of the Chinese pressure there, which is a battleground between China and United States.
Okay, clearly, it looked like, as both of you are pointing out, that it is just not as simple as Israel versus Iran conflict or Israel versus Iran war. There are many layers to it, very complex equations being involved, with, of course, the regional powers, regional, countries like India and Pakistan and other regional powers in the Middle East or West Asia trying to find a footing for themselves, trying to protect their own interests, and of course the larger powers like China, Russia, and United States having their own short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals to stay for in the region and find solutions as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Aneja and Mr. Trigunayat as well, for joining us and sharing your valuable inputs with us and our viewers on this ongoing nasty conflict between Israel and Iran. Let's hope there is a peaceful resolution to this conflict as soon as possible. We'll come back again next week with a different topic. Till then, keep watching other episodes of Worldview and Dialogues as well. Thank you.
Thank you.